If I were to ask you what the best Mario game is, I feel confident predicting that you would say Super Mario Galaxy. It is by far the most positively seen game in the series if the internet is anything to go by. However, it is not my favorite. In fact, I think it's kinda overrated a bit, just a smidge. And like any good opinion piece, I should state that it's okay to like bad things, but that doesn't suddenly make it not bad. For the less sarcastically integrated of society, the Galaxy games are both great, and I would never deny that. But I just can't help but feel that both of them have these problems that none of the other 3D Marios have. So let's not waste any more time and dive into the Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 Retrospective. That's right, we're just jumping right in. The Galaxy games both look great, and if it weren't for Skyward Sword, I would consider them the best looking Wii games. Although I do feel that the first game definitely captures that space vibe a lot better, as well as being the game that I prefer visually. Not only with the backgrounds being a beautiful starry sky, really emphasizing that you are in space, while the second game uses a generic skybox, which most certainly is not the vibe that a space adventure would give off, but also in the color palette that they used. In the first games, the colors are darker and a bit richer, whereas the second game uses standard Mario colors that are brighter. It's a small difference, but it's enough for me to say that I prefer the first game. As for the music, it's pretty good. The tracks are fantastic, the sweeping orchestra giving everything a grand feel. Although if I'm being honest, Gusty Garden Galaxy is not the best track in the game or even the most emotionally investing track in the game for me. Don't get me wrong, it's still wonderful, but there are a lot of tracks that are a lot better. For instance, Good A Galaxy. Just listen to the bombastic brass as it slams through your speakers. Or take a track that is pretty much the exact opposite, Space Junk Galaxy, a soothing piano piece with the occasional synth. This track is elegant and beautiful, perfectly capturing this feeling of tranquility. Or Rosalina's Observatory and how it builds into this wonderful waltz tune. Galaxy 2's soundtrack is better. Starship Mario is the best homeworld theme in the entire series. I will not be taking questions. Sky Station Galaxy feels like a grand opener to an exciting adventure. Yoshi Star Galaxy is one of my most listened to musical pieces ever, it's so good. Puzzle Plane Galaxy is an absolute jam. Cosmic Cove Galaxy is somehow a better version of Space Junk Galaxy. Cloudy Court Galaxy is what Gusty Garden wishes it was. Yeah, I said it. I could continue with listing further tracks, but I need to get back to digging my grave. As mentioned in the previous retrospective, Galaxy is the first game that I think Mario felt truly great to control. Mario may not have much weight, but it is made up for in how smooth it all feels. The long jump is way more satisfying to pull off here compared to 64, as are the backflips. Though the triple jump and side jump feel a little off, and it doesn't feel like it prioritizes them as much as the other games, but it's not that big of an issue. This game also introduces a mid-air spin, and it's mainly used for jump correction and breaking these crystals. I'm not that big of a fan of how you have to shake the Wii remote to execute it, but other than that, it's a very convenient tool, and it allows you to feel more comfortable making bigger jumps. Flood also kind of does this, but the controls were kind of cumbersome, so unless it was a massive failure of a jump, it wasn't as easy as just performing a single action that stops you in midair to more precisely land somewhere. But wait, this game was released on the Nintendo Wii, and we all know what the Wii is famous for.
Wait, that's not a Wii remote. That's an unfunny joke.
As somebody who grew up with the Wii, I can easily say that they are not good, but they aren't necessarily bad either. The big problem is that a lot of the actions that you perform are forced. I already mentioned I'm not that big a fan of having to shake the controller to perform the spin, but this ball is the bane of my existence and the mana ray is ridiculously awkward to control. The point of motion controls is to immerse you into the world, but this is not immersive in the slightest. I don't feel like I'm riding a manta ray, I feel like I'm feeling to control a manta ray. But everything to do with the pointer feels pretty good, and it's not like the other gimmicks ruin the game or anything. Except for the bird in Galaxy 2, man does it suck. What was it with Nintendo during the Wii generation and adding motion controlled flying bird sections that always without fail suck? Adding to Mario's movesets are a set of once again underwhelming power-ups. At least in the first game, I'll get to the second in a bit. The bee mushroom allows you to climb honeycombs and hover in the air for a bit. It's okay, I guess. There's nothing particularly noteworthy about it, but it's not the worst thing in the world. The boo mushroom turns you into a boo, allowing you to hover and phase through certain objects. It's like if the vanish cap was slightly more used. The ice flower allows you to skate over water, and it is by far the best power-up in the entire game. It's a ton of fun building up a bunch of speed and then gliding across the water. At least it is for 30 seconds, which is honestly kind of baffling. Considering that when it is used in a level, that entire level is built around the power-up, limiting it to 30 seconds just makes me confused. There's no advantages to using it outside of its intended areas, so why they couldn't just let you keep it will forever be an enigma to me. The same can be said for the fire flower in its lamest incarnation yet. 30-second time limit on top of being clunky to use. The time limit makes no sense yet again for similar reasons as the ice flower. Maybe they thought that because shaking allows you to throw fireballs for some reason and also allows you to spin, then you limit it so that the player can gain the ability to spin again. Despite the fact that they could very easily have just use the B button. I mean, sure, it's reserved for shooting star bits, but I don't really think that there are any inherent reasons as to why you would ever shoot a star bit for any reason other than to feed a hungry Luma. So have the special actions for power-ups be mapped to B, and if you really have to keep the shooting star bits thing, then you could have easily just made the power-ups replace that instead of the spin. The spring mushroom is the most infamous power-up in the entire game, and one of the most infamous in the entire series. And yet another hot take, it really ain't that bad. Don't get me. It's awkward as heck, but once you get used to it, it's honestly kind of fun to use, especially in the level it's designed for. And then we have the red star, used to fly, and you can only use it in the hub world and tutorial level. The controls are good and it's fun to use, and yet for some reason they didn't think of using it in the levels, even for the post-game stars. Galaxy 2 only introduces 2 new power-ups, but both of them are significantly better than the first games. The rock flower turns you into a rock, where you can do a lot of damage and break some structures. It's a lot of fun to use, and they get some decent mileage out of it. But then there's the cloud flower, easily the best power-up to come from either game. With it, you can create 3 cloud platforms on top of reducing your fall speed. This allows you to cover a really long distance in the most satisfying way possible. You can get to a lot of areas, as well as having a safety net to catch you should you screw up. Not much else to say about it, it's just a really cool power-up. What is easily Galaxy 2's biggest addition is Yoshi, and he is great in this game. He can eat different enemies and spit them back out to break stuff. He can use his tongue to grapple onto these flower things, and he even gets to be a part of the star collection animation if you grab a star while riding him. How wholesome. But where he really gets a lot of use are with the fruits that really expand his gameplay possibilities. The dash pepper makes him fast, the blim fruit makes him accidentally drawn on DeviantArt and allows you to slowly rise, and the bulberry allows you to access platforms that don't exist, but this makes exist if that makes any sense. They get about as much mileage out of these ideas as could be reasonably expected. Overall, these games look and sound great, have good movement, and interesting if generally underdeveloped power-ups. Sounds like a slam dunk for peak Mario, right? Well, I have saved my nuclear take for now. The reason I don't enjoy these games as much as everyone else: the structure. Okay, so what exactly is wrong with the structure of the Galaxy games? It mostly comes down to the fact that these games don't feel like they know what they want to be. Back in 2017, with the release of Odyssey, Nintendo released the concept of Course Clear Mario and Sandbox Mario. 3D World and 3D Land were very clearly Course Clear games, and 64, Sunshine, and Odyssey were very clearly sandbox games. But what about the Galaxy games? Nintendo officially classified them as Course Clear, which is fine, but the issues come with the sandbox elements, which I do not think mix well together. A quick side thing to mention, since it's important for what I'm about to say next. My favorite thing about Mario as a series is how well the games manage to combine exploration with solid platforming. My favorite thing to do in Super Mario World is look for the secret exits. My favorite thing to do in New Super Mario Bros. U, which is a definitive New Super experience since that's the one I played most as a child, is to look for the star coins and secret exits. Sure, the level design is top-notch and fun, but the level of exploration combined with the platforming is where the magic happens. Exploration is also my favorite thing in the Zelda series outside of the dungeons, but that one is more about what is in the world, whereas in Mario it's moving through the world to these areas that appeals to me. This brings me back to Galaxy. Because it's set up like a sandbox game with a certain number of stars being required to beat the game, but also having the levels be structured like a course clear game, means that the stars are always at the end of a path. You will never find a star anywhere other than at the end of this path. What this means is that when the game tells you that you need 60 stars, what it actually means is you just need to complete 60 obstacle courses. Even 3D World had better progression and exploration than Galaxy. You don't just need to complete a certain number of stages, you need to go into those stages and look around them for green stars to progress. There's nothing like this in the entirety of Galaxy. However, just because stars are a lucrative thing that could be a secret, doesn't mean that has to be the only thing that's a secret. But Galaxy doesn't have any secrets that are intrinsically or extrinsically satisfying. Lives are pretty much the only major thing that I can really think of, and even then, Galaxy is such an easy game that I never find myself getting a game over. And they're usually incredibly easy to find. Most secrets in this game feel like they can be found by merely moving the camera, and that's no fun. Galaxy has practically no exploration in it, and I'm sorry, but that does affect how much I enjoy the game. Galaxy 2 is in a very similar boat. Despite having a different setup with a proper world map, it still has the issue of feeling that you need to complete a certain amount of obstacle courses to advance. However, where Galaxy 2 succeeds, where Galaxy failed, is with the comet medals. These things are a godsend, and they allow for a level of exploration that is sorely missed. There's only one in each stage, although there are quite a few times where it devolves into being in a location that's a little trickier to get to, but it's better than nothing. At the very least, there are a few that involve looking around, and those ones are always appreciated. There are also the green stars, but I'll get to those when we discuss the 100% completion. Comet medals also fix one of the most irritating aspects of the first game. There are certain levels that would get a prankster comet that would allow you to access a harder version of a pre-existing mission. However, when these comets appear is always random, and it can lead to a lot of frustration. It also forces you to play only that mission, unless you want to feed a Luma to shuffle everything. So if you wanted to get a star you missed out on, but there's a comet in your way, you're out of luck. It's a needlessly obtuse and frustrating system. By linking these prankster comet missions to a medal, it allows you to control when and if you want to do it, as well as allowing you to still access regular missions. These prankster missions in the first game are all kind of underwhelming, though the second ones can be fairly interesting and fun. The timed ones are all way too generous in the first game, though the second game can be really strict, especially the ones where you have to collect clocks. The Daredevil comets reduce your health to 1 and task you with completing a level. They're fine enough, I suppose. The Cosmic Comets are only in the first game and are races with Cosmic Mario. They're all relatively easy if you're a god of the game such as me, but still somewhat fun. Fast Foe Comets speed everything up and are once again fine enough. These two are replaced with the much better Clone Comet, which has a bunch of clones of Mario following you as you try to beat the challenge given to you, and the Double Time Comet, which speeds up the obstacles rather than the enemies, which is a lot more interesting in terms of platforming. The purple coins have you having to find a bunch of purple coins, sometimes within a certain time limit. It's a slight improvement from the previous two games, mainly in how much more distinct they are from regular coins, which helps your eyes not glaze over. And finally, Romp Comets have you having to defeat a horde of enemies within a minute, and it's fine enough, I guess. I think that the missions do a bit to spice up the gameplay and make it more interesting, and are worthwhile enough reason to look for the medal. Though in Galaxy's case, it most certainly doesn't make up for the lack of exploration. The last thing to bring up in this section is the hub worlds, and neither of them are great. The Comet Observatory has a level split up into a few distinct sections, and within these sections are a cluster of galaxies. I don't really like this setup. I find it really difficult to find previous stages, and getting around isn't nearly as satisfying or interesting as Peach's Castle and Dial Delfino. Another issue that it has is that it's incredibly boring. Sure, it has a cool outward design and good music, but there's absolutely nothing to find. Other than Rosalina's storybook, that is. This storybook is the most interesting thing to find in the entire game, even if it is just walking into a room. I enjoy the story, and I think that it's really cool that Miyamoto allowed Rosalina to get a thorough and in-depth backstory. While the lack of a story in Galaxy 2 doesn't bother me too much, it does absolutely enhance the first game. Other than that though, I don't really like the hub world. And then we have Starship Mario, which has a really good musical track and a pun that Lubba makes. That's it. There's nothing to do here, nothing to find, just a couple of dull micro distractions to do before getting back to the levels. Doesn't even feel like the developers wanted you to look around, considering that you always start right before the wheel to go back to the world map. The buildup of the music doesn't even work as well as the observatory, since that one had everything lighting up as you progress through the game. Here though, there's nothing indicating that you're steadily getting stronger or anything. Overall, the structure of these two games leave a lot to be desired, with the combination of sandbox and corks clear elements not being that great. Despite the comet medals in Galaxy 2, I still feel like there's a lack of satisfying exploration in either game. And in the end, no matter what, it's gonna feel like a downgrade when compared to its predecessors and successors.
I got a cold while recording this video, so if the audio sounds strange or I sound like I want to die, that's why. This structural issue that I have with the games leaves the levels and platforming as the only thing that can save them, and luckily I do think that they have some pretty solid levels. Since these games do take place in space, a lot of the level design takes this into account and builds a variety of spherical platforms into a series of satisfying platforming romps. I feel like this idea is almost wasted with the focus on being a course clear game. There's a lot of potential to hide interesting secrets on different parts of the planets and whatnot. Anyway, the point is that when platforming, the game is really fun, although one of these games does a much better job at this than the other. Even then, whenever the games aren't focused on platforming, they fall flat on their face. The first game has about 30 stages, and each of them range in quality. Gateway Galaxy does a pretty good job at introducing you to some of the game's concepts, easing you into traversing planetoids by having you hunt down rabbits, and then giving you a very simple platforming challenge. But the real first level is Good Day Galaxy, which is a disappointing level, not necessarily in how it's designed, but rather in how it shows how this game could have so very easily opted for a sandbox approach, but doesn't. One of the missions involves you having to use the many launch stars to chart a path so that you can feed Illuma 100 star bits. Collecting them all is fairly easy and doesn't take a bunch of time, so if it were a more open level, this would be fantastic. But unfortunately, it isn't. It also doesn't give the greatest impressions of how the rest of the game is going to function, since it starts you on the same planet and asks you to find a different exit point. Most levels start you in completely different locations, with other sections being nothing more than background pieces, which really makes you wonder why they did that. Some levels, like Honey Hive Galaxy, even specifically block certain sections, rigidly forcing you down a specific path. I can't help but ask what good this does. It's not like there's any excuse for it, at least Sunshine tried to tell a story throughout its stages. Why is collecting stars out of the intended order such a bad thing? If it nudged you down the path a mission once, but still allowed you to pick any that you wanted, then a lot of my issues might have been completely negated, or at the very least dulled a bit. As it stands though, it feels like a completely arbitrary decision. I find that the best stages in the game are the ones that have 1 star in them, like Sweet Sweet Galaxy, Sling Pod Galaxy, the Bowser stages, Matter Spider Galaxy, Sand Spiral Galaxy, etc. The reason why is because they are focused on pure platforming, whether it be a conveyor belt with a bunch of holes in it, having to activate a bunch of tiles, a series of platforms that disappear when you step on them, having to fling yourself from platform to platform, or a sort of test of what you've learned. There are a few motion control stages, and they are about as good as you can expect. I already mentioned my opinion on the motion controls in the presentation mechanics section of the video, and my opinion on these stages rests on that. None of this is to say that all the stages in the game are bad. Gusty Garden Galaxy, despite only having the 3rd or 4th best musical track in the game, is still a pretty fun stage. Outside of the gusts of wind, I never feel like traversing these with the flowers feels right. Other than that though, it's fairly enjoyable. Freeze Flame Galaxy is a great stage with a great premise that is executed flawlessly, that also delivers a bit of that progression from Sunshine. The first star has you going through the frozen section, the second one has you doing the fire section, and the last one has both of these colliding into one. but there are a few that I don't particularly care for. Beach Bowl Galaxy is not one of my favorites. Held your own size, this is one of the best stages in the game for the exploration value, and I guess? The stars have a bit of that, but most of the exploration feels kind of surface level, which is ironic since it's a water stage. Because it's a water stage, I think that it once again suffers from the same issue that a lot of water stages suffer from by being kind of empty and barren, with a few spots of interest spread across a vast sea of empty design. Gold Leaf Galaxy, despite its best efforts to mitigate the laziness, still manages to feel lazy. There's not enough to distinguish the two beyond the color palette and reverse design. With Honey Hive Galaxy, by the way, I'm not sure why I didn't write that in the script. Galaxy 2, far and away, has the superior levels. A big part of this is obviously that it has a better idea of what it wants to be, but beyond that, the platforming just feels a lot better here, and there's more of an exploration factor here. Even just comparing Sky Station Galaxy to Good Egg Galaxy, there's a noticeable improvement. It feels a lot more structured and man-made compared to Good Egg, which doesn't have a distinct platforming feel. I think what it shows is that Galaxy wants to be about platforming while still having that feel from the previous games, whereas Galaxy 2 doesn't really care about that feeling and would rather just deliver a solid platforming experience. And I think that the second game largely succeeds, whereas Galaxy stumbles a bit. Even in the first world, Galaxy 2 has strong gimmicks that make each level stand out. Yoshi Star Galaxy has a boppin' tune, and Yoshi 2, I guess. Spin Dig gives you a spin drill to drill through the planets. Fluffy Bluff introduces the Cloud Flower, and Flip Swap has you having to platform while spinning to turn these platforms, but the rest of the stage is easing you into the mechanics. And from there, the game throws several more interesting gimmicks and such while also delivering some really good platforming. Cosmic Cove is a water level that you get to freeze and skate across. Beat Block Galaxy has blocks that disappear with the beat of the song. Flipsville is confusing to explain, but I love it. Chomp Works has you having to guide chain chomps down a path in order to progress. Sweet Mystery Galaxy is an entire level based around the bulb fruit, which leads to some really fun platforming. Upside Dizzy Galaxy really pushes the gravity flipping of these games, and it's a lot of fun. Clockwork Ruins is what Tick-Tock Clock should have felt like, though instead of Ancient Ruins, just a regular clock. Throwback Galaxy is a remake of one of the best Mario levels, so of course it's gonna be good. And of course all of the Bowser stages are pretty good, and they all act as really good tests of your platforming skills for up to that point in the game. Not all of the levels are great though. The motion controlled gimmicks aren't that good, and I have similar feelings to Starshine Beach Galaxy as I do with Beach Bowl, although in its defense it has Yoshi, so that's a pretty big improvement. Honey Hop is basically just an inferior Honey Hive Galaxy, and that's no good. Same goes for Shiverburn, though I will admit that it does have the better name. Battle Belt is just combat, which has never been particularly strong in any Mario game, and the only cool thing about it is the background. Even then, there are so many levels that are great that I don't really care about these few stragglers. I don't really have anything else that I want to say in this section, and there's also nothing that I can think of to smoothly transition to the bosses. But yeah, the section is over. Super Mario Galaxy was the first 3D Mario game that I feel finally got mostly good bosses. And the sequel followed suit. Galaxy won first. Dino Piranha is fine, though the fight can drag into boring territory due to it moving kind of slowly across the planet, and trying to get yourself to line up a shot can be a little cumbersome. But as a first boss, it's pretty good. King Caliente is a really fun boss, with you having to avoid the fire coconuts and hitting the regular ones back at him. It's simple, but it's super engaging and fun, which is exactly what you want with any boss. Easily my pick for second best boss from either game. The Mandibug stack is whatever, just ground pound its back. Not the most riveting thing in the world, but it's at least functional. Mega Leg is pretty fun, with you having to guide some bullet bills to break stuff and try to get the Grand Star. Cabela is another fun boss, with you having to hit her with the Koopa shells that she conjures, with her also teleporting a bunch. It's a really solid fight, not much else to say. Tarantox is a decent boss that utilizes these sling pods pretty well, with you having to line up a shot with the weak points on his body. I've heard that Bouldergeist is really difficult, and I don't see it. You need to use Bomb Boost to destroy its armor. It's a really fun and well-paced fight. It doesn't outstay its welcome, and he is the perfect difficulty. Bowser Jr. is fine enough. He'll fly around in an airship, and you have to throw shells at it to damage it. It's okay, not much else. Major Burrows has you needing to perform a ground pound before he burrows so that you can perform a spin attack on him when he's exposed. Baron Burr is inferior to Aaron Burr since he didn't kill a historical figure in a duel. Other than that, he is also quite a boring boss. Just get to him while avoiding the ice chunks he shoots at you along with a shockwave and then spin him to death. Kingpin is yet another boss that has you having to throw shells at it to defeat it, and it really isn't anything special. Easily the most underwhelming boss in the game, and one of the most underwhelming in the series. Galaxy 2's bosses are of about the same quality, though it does reuse some from the previous game. And not even just in terms of straight up reusing them, but it feels like they redesigned them or use the same general concept as a boss from the first game. Pee-wee Piranha is basically the exact same fight as Dino Piranha, the only difference being that you need to hit it directly rather than its tail. King Lakitu is like Camilla, just that instead of picking up a shell and throwing it at him, you eat spinies that he throws with Yoshi and then spit them back at him. Prince Picante is literally the exact same fight as King Caliente, just in a different arena. On top of this, Bouldergeist, Mandibug Stack, Bugaboom, Major Burrows, and actual Dino Piranha and King Caliente are straight up reused from the previous game. To be fair, it is in the Secret World S and are all part of the boss rush. There are some actual original bosses and they're all great. At least most of them are. Dig-a-Leg uses the spin drill pretty effectively, with you having to time when you use it to damage the boss. Rolladillo is okay, you have to attack it from behind after it tries to roll into you 3 times and tires out. There's not a lot to it, but it's a decent enough time. Mega Hammer is quite fun and has you needing to use Yoshi to eat a bullet bill and then spit it back out at his weak spots. Glamdozer is a really fun fight, with you having to travel to the underside of the arena and then ground pound a grate when she is standing over it. Squizzard is okay, I guess. You have to use the Fire Flower to shoot fireballs into his mouth to damage him, all while avoiding whatever he throws at you. There's just not a lot going on here and it makes it a fairly boring fight. Gobblegut is a great fight and one of the best uses of these games' gravity gimmick when it comes to the boss fights. You fly around the arena and then dive into the planet, with you having to spin into his different weak points across his body. It's a lot of fun, especially with a hard to rematch later on in the game. Boomsday Machine is the best boss in Galaxy 2, with you using the Cloud Flower to try and get to the top to do a ground pound. It's fairly dynamic and the progression between the 3 phases is seamless and gives the fight a nice difficulty curve. Man, that almost sounded like a real analysis. Now into the Bowser fights. Galaxy has what is easily my favorite Bowser fight in the entire series. Not to rag on other Mario Bowser fights that use the main gimmick of the game really well, but Galaxy's gimmick allows for the fight to be really engaging, especially with the final encounter. On the first planet, Bowser will get into a ball and roll around the planet, with you having to use your spin to get him out of it. On the next planet, you need to spin these bulbs into him to get out of the ball. Then on the final planet, you need to avoid all the shockwaves as you try to lure him into breaking the glass so he burns himself, allowing you to damage him. He can be pretty aggressive towards the end, and the fight itself is really engaging and fun. And then you have Galaxy 2's Bowser fight, which is just a step above Sunshine's, but that still makes it the 3rd weakest fight in the series. The fight is based around how Bowser is a big boy and tries to squash you, inadvertently sending meteors crashing into the planet that you then hit into him. The final battle can be pretty fun with how many attacks he sends, with the shockwaves and fire that you have to outmaneuver, but the problem that I have with this fight is how you attack him. It just isn't as satisfying ground pounding into his sphere or into him as it is to chase him down and whack him a few times. It also isn't as dynamic as that fight. Again, there are no bad Bowser fights in the 3D games, but this one is definitely a bit lackluster. Overall though, the bosses in these games are on the whole quite good and a pretty big step up from the previous games. Heck, they're probably the best bosses of any 3D Mario that isn't Odyssey, and that's mighty impressive. This is a spiel that is present in all the 3D Mario retrospectives because it's important for the context of why I 100% these games. The 100% experience of a 3D platformer is one of the most important aspects of the game for me. While any percenting is fun and all, there's this specific desire to collect and do everything there is to collect and do, and with these types of games only. 100%ing Zelda is awful, but I could do Banjo-Kazooie all day. It's hard to put into words, but I think the main thing with it is because with most 3D platformers, you're already spending the whole game collecting things anyway, so the 100% one is pretty much just doing more of what I was doing the whole game anyway, as opposed to Zelda, which is entirely about the adventure, and collecting stuff is merely a side activity. The closest it comes to this is beating all 120 shrines, and I would gladly do that again. And now on to the video specific portion. With that out of the way, Super Mario Galaxy and Super Mario Galaxy 2 are both a bit of an annoying slog to 100%. There are for sure some fun and non-tedious stars in the games, but they both have certain issues. I would say that I prefer Galaxy 2, but we're not quite there yet. The first game has 2 major problems that plague the completionist run-through.
Number 1, the prankster comets. As mentioned earlier in the video, the comets appearing at random means that trying to go for every star in the game is a pain, since you either need to try and get to the levels that have one and complete them, or pay to have them disappear. I already complained about it earlier in the video though. The real problem comes with Super Luigi Galaxy. Luigi is a really cool addition, and having it be a secret unlockable character with a slightly different playstyle is really cool. Problem is that the game considers collecting all 120 stars as Luigi and Mario as truly completing the game, since you need to do both in order to unlock the secret final level Grand Finale Galaxy. Sure, there are a few differences other than Luigi being the superior of the two brothers. You lose air a little faster when underwater, as well as whenever you spin, and Cosmic Luigi is a bit more challenging than Cosmic Mario. And the fact that they made it so that you can find Luigi as Luigi is really cool. But these changes aren't enough to make collecting all 120 stars again feel different enough to make it intrinsically satisfying. And while it is kinda cool to get to go through the opening of the game without Bowser ruining everything, it isn't something that I feel required 200%ing the game. Other than that, since the game is based on completing linear obstacle course for the most part with a limited focus on exploration, every other star is pretty easy to forget. In fact, I would say that this game is tied with 3D Land as the easiest 3D Mario to 100%, but it is still monotonous. 100% in Galaxy 2 is much more comfortable experience than his predecessor, but it still isn't without its faults. Gathering all of the normal stars is a fairly straightforward task, and collecting all the comet medals and completing those tasks is also really fun. But then, once you've collected 120 stars, 120 green stars appear. That's right, it's finally time to talk about these things. The reason I neglected to mention them earlier is because in order to even access them, you need to 50% the game, and that's a lot of effort to just add one element of exploration. But yeah, there's one green star equivalent to every regular star. This is too much. I think that having 60 would have been plenty, or at the most one for every regular mission. The entire second half of the 100% run of the game is dominated with this, and it can be really obnoxious. To be fair, having an overly long and obnoxious 100% experience isn't exclusive to Galaxy 2, and it's not like it's even the biggest issue with the game, but we'll complain about that when we get there. Outside of the quantity issue, I love these things. They're never obvious and require you to really explore. You'll get an audio cue whenever you're near one, but that's the only hint that you'll get as to their location. And a lot of them are hidden in pretty devious locations. Since the developers knew that only the hardcore gamers would even be able to get to the point in the game where they become available, they made it so that it's a real challenge trying to find them all. And after 2 games that de-emphasized exploration like these ones, despite Galaxy 2 alleviating this somewhat, it's a breath of fresh air for the second half. And unlike Galaxy's final stage being nothing more than a formality, this game's final stage, Grandmaster Galaxy, is the real deal. Galaxy 2 started my favorite new tradition in 3D Mario, with a super hard stage that makes me grip my controller tightly in frustration, but not break because I don't have anger issues. While Champions Road and Darker Side from 3D World and Odyssey, respectively, I think are better and more fun to beat, this level is still pretty good, and still has the most stressful challenge of any of the 4 that are currently released. Nobody remembers the ultimate test. Everyone knows this level for the perfect run. Knowing that you have no room for error and that any mistake means that you restart is something that I hope gets revisited, since it was handled pretty well here. The level is also completely fair despite being stupidly hard. This level is something that I actively want to pursue, so it means that it's easier to justify slowly getting tendonitis or slogging through some of the more mundane green star missions, because I know that it'll be worth it to get to replay a difficult yet rewarding stage, as opposed to 100%ing the same game twice with 0 substantial differences. Overall, Super Mario Galaxy is a lot better as an any percent game. The game doesn't offer enough to justify it. Super Mario Galaxy 2 is far and away the superior 100% experience, and despite being a little too long, is still a generally satisfying and fun time. Let us now wrap this video up. In case it wasn't obvious, I do indeed like the 2 Galaxy games, but they are not my favorite. The lack of exploration that is present in every other 3D Mario game, and most of the 2D games as well, the underwhelming power-ups with stupid restrictions, hub worlds that are both cramped and don't justify existing, and some obnoxious requirements that need to be met when 100%ing them. It's all just too much stuff that adds up for me to say that they are my all-time favorites. It would be stupid of me to say that these games are terrible. I'm not trying to be a contrarian for the sake of being a contrarian. These are issues with the games that I legitimately have and not something I manufacture just to get a rise out of people. If these are your favorite Mario games, that's great. There's enough great stuff here that I can see why so many people would say that. Some people just don't have the same taste as me or complaints that I do, and I am perfectly fine with that. Make sure to like and comment so I get boosted in the algorithm and get a ton of views/subscribers, as well as subscribe for the next retrospective, where I'll be looking at Super Mario 3D Land and 3D World, and will sadly not have a take that is so nuclear that I'll have to hide in my secret underground bunker.
I will say that I probably like 3D World a lot more than everyone else though. Ooh, a little element to get you watching the next mediocre video. Thanks for watching and have a great rest of the day and slash night. I will now die because slightly sick.